Hi, I'm Jake with BirdDog. Today we'll be looking through the lens of our BirdDog P200 and adjusting its image settings with our newly released Cam Control 3, available for free at our website at birddog.tv. We will be going through the exposure, white balance, picture, color matrix, and advanced settings. Let's get started. When you open up Cam Control, you'll be able to select the available BirdDog cameras on your network from the drop-down here. Let's select the BirdDog P200 listed. First, we'll check out the exposure menu. In here, you have the option to change the exposure mode on the camera. We have full auto, manual, shutter priority, iris priority, and bright. When the camera is in full auto, the camera will automatically adjust its exposure by changing its shutter speed, opening and closing its iris, as well as applying gain to the image. The slow shutter limit slider will let you set the minimum value you wish the camera to go down to if it feels it needs to adjust the shutter speed in order to get the correct exposure. The gain limit slider will let you set the maximum amount of gain you wish the camera to apply to the image if it feels it needs to adjust gain in order to get the correct exposure. Next, we'll check out the manual mode. In here, we have gain limit, shutter, iris, and high sensitivity. While the gain limit slider is much like before, the gain slider above it will let you set the gain that you wish to apply to this image. As of right now, we have 0 dB applied. We'll adjust the maximum. We can see that we're overexposed. However, we can see that the limit on this manual slider only goes up to 10.7. If I were to increase this slider and go all the way up to the maximum of 50 decibels, we'll be able to then increase the gain slider above and get as far overexposed as we need. The next slider we have available is our shutter speed. A good rule of thumb is to double the frames per second set of the camera to get the shutter value. In my scenario, I have my NDI camera streaming at 30 frames per second, so I will need to adjust the shutter to be 1/60. You may have noticed that when we lowered the shutter speed, we actually increased the exposure of the image. This is because the shutter speed of the camera is being held open for longer, allowing more light to hit the sensor and therefore adding light to our image. Next, we have the ability to change the iris directly of the camera. As of right now, I'm fully open at f1.6. However, the BirdDog wall plate looks a little bit too overexposed, so I think I should adjust that down to maybe 1 or 2 stops. 1 stop, 2 stop. That looks perfect. The next exposure mode we have, and my personal favorite, is shutter priority. In shutter priority mode, the camera will automatically adjust its iris and gain values while keeping the shutter value specific to what you set it to. So in this scenario, I can always have my shutter speed be exactly at 1/60, which is perfect for my 30 frames per second shoot. However, it will adjust the gain and open up the iris as much as it can to adjust and have a correctly exposed image. The next exposure mode we have is iris priority. Much like shutter priority earlier, iris priority will keep the iris constant while adjusting the shutter speed and gain applied to the image. In this next example, I'm going to lower the iris, and in turn, the camera will lower the shutter speed as a way of increasing the amount of exposure. We are fully open at f1.6. I will stop down to f14, which is a very, very closed iris. And then now I'm going to shake my hand in front of the camera and we'll see the trails that are existing because of the slow shutter speed. When I go ahead and increase and open up the iris again, we can see that the exposure goes back to where it was before, but there are no light trails from my hand. The last exposure mode we have is bright mode. Bright mode uses an internal algorithm to adjust both the gain and the iris according to the brightness level set freely by the user. Exposure is controlled by gain when dark and iris when bright. As both gain and iris are fixed, this mode is used when exposing a fixed camera sensitivity. When switching from full auto or shutter priority mode to bright mode, the current status will be retained for a short period of time. The exposure is adjusted automatically using the values manually set for the bright level and high sensitivity. Next, we have the white balance section. So we have a couple of white balance modes that we have available for these cameras, and they are auto, indoor, outdoor, a one push white balance, which I recommend using a white balance card with that, a second auto, a manual values, which will let you adjust the red and blue gains independently, an outdoor type of auto, and a few sodium lamps auto and outdoor autos. My personal favorite is to use a white balance card and adjust manually the red and blue gains. From here, I can dial in and see that, hey, this is a little bit too green. And we can dial that in over here. That's a little too blue, and that's a little too green as well. These red and blue sliders are available on a BirdDog PTZ keyboard as well for finer tuned controls. Please note that while these specific red and blue gain values might be perfect for my shoot, they will not necessarily be perfect for yours. That is dependent on the color temperature of your light sources in your production. Next, we have the picture settings menu. In here, we have the ability to flip the camera for upside down and ceiling mounted installations. We have the ability to mirror this image to flip that onto the other side. We also have an effect for black and white to directly cut out all of the saturation of that image. Next, which is self-explanatory, we have the sharpness values. We want to increase the sharpness of the image or decrease. We also have a noise reduction module as well. My personal preference is to usually set this around 3, depending on the subject that you're looking at. It can go up to 4. I don't usually set it to 5, but you absolutely can. It will definitely get a more smooth image. I recommend, if you are going to be using a higher noise reduction, that you may want to look into increasing the sharpness to define those image edges that get smoothed out. The next section that we have over here is chroma suppression, and chroma suppression mode is specifically engaged for low light conditions where there may be color noise from an increased amount of gain from the auto exposure. This can be set to low, medium, high, and off. The next really important setting that everyone should be aware of on our cameras is the gamma setting. Gamma is the control of the relative intensity of the middle range of grays compared to full black and full white. In other words, this is a way to adjust your contrast directly and then go back in and adjust your exposure and saturation and everything else. So as a quick example, we have our gamma set to 0, and we'll switch this over to 1. So as we increased the gamma, the darkness and the shadows of the image were increased. So from here, if we go back up and then we're to adjust the amount of gain that we want to apply, let's go over to manual. In this case, we can see that we have to push more gain to get that image back to more exposed than where we were before. However, you'll notice that this is a lot more contrasty at gamma 1 versus gamma 0. So we're back at 3.6, but let's go back over to gamma 1 because I have enough light that I don't need to use and adjust the gamma to change the amount of contrast in this image. So from here, we'll go back down and we'll lower that. Next, we have an IR cut filter, which will engage the IR filter inside the lens housing when activated. As you can see, we lose color, but now we're looking at the camera or the image through this IR filter. Next, we have a stabilizer on our 30x zoom cameras, much like our P200 here. When activated, this will work to reduce low frequency vibrations. It uses a digital zoom, so this will adjust your angle of view and resolution. However, it is minimal, as you can see here. Next, we have a fantastic color shading tool called the Color Matrix. And in here, we have the ability to change the hue and the gain for all of these specific colors: magenta, red, yellow, green, cyan, blue. In this example, I'm going to take out all of the red of that fox amp. As we can see, we still have our green and our blues from the painting over here, while the red amp has been totally removed. And then we'll go to the opposite. We'll put that back to normal and add as much saturation into that amp as possible. So this color matrix tool is specifically for dialing in your P200s and your P100s and all of our BirdDog cameras. However, when you're combining these with other manned cameras from other manufacturers, this is a really easy way to dial in the different sensor manufacturers and dial in and get those colors matching for your production. Last on the list is the Advanced Image Enhancement tab. In here, the video enhancement properties allow for the adjustment of fine-tuned controls of the camera's performance for detail and exposure. Enabling the video enhancement will attempt to adjust the amount of detail and gain for both the shadows and the highlights of the image. This can result in a dramatically more balanced image. Please use caution when using extreme settings because they will increase video noise in the shadows of the video. When video enhancement is enabled, the brightness slider adjusts the level of enhancement provided by the video enhancement function. The higher amount will result in a more vivid image and more sensitivity in the shadows. However, this will increase video noise produced by the camera. Let's check that out now. In here, we can see that there is definitely more shadow noise. However, we can go in and bump this back up. As we increase the brightness slider, we notice that the exposure of the image increased. However, when we go back and toggle between video enhancement on and off, we can see the details that the enhancement added on. In this case, the brightness brought up the vibrance of the red and the paintings, as well as increased the lightness of the shadows to create a more bright image. The brightness compensation setting informs the camera where your desired enhancement levels should be focused. If your image has large amounts of dark areas that need to be enhanced, then set the brightness compensation to dark. If your image appears overexposed, set the brightness compensation to bright. You can see those settings here. The compensation level adjusts the mask for the camera to apply the video enhancement effect. By increasing this from low to high, the camera will attempt to adjust a greater amount of the shadow or highlight area of the image. Lastly, for finalized high resolution, we have the ability to define more edges of the image and overall sharpness with this toggle switch. The last and final thing to look out for when using a BirdDog P200 is the fact that the lens is not a fixed aperture. So when you are fully zoomed out compared to fully zoomed in, you will have less light on the sensor as the iris is closing down throughout the zoom range. Let me show you an example. If we switch over to the image of this P200, we can go fully wide and we can see that the blinds and the wall plate are now overly exposed. However, when I go to zoom in, we notice that the image gets a little bit darker, and that's because the iris is stopping down as we zoom in through that lens, and we get more and more zoomed in until you notice that it doesn't actually get darker anymore. So at that point, we actually hit the final as wide open as it can be at that zoom range. So it's roughly, let's go back over to my camera control. It's roughly around like a 4.8 when you go fully wide. Maybe closer to an f5.6. The range is somewhere right in between f4 to f5.6. So if you are in a manual operation mode, please note that as you zoom in, you will lose light if you are set to wide open compared to all of that light getting in over here. This is why a mode like shutter priority is ideal for mixed lighting environments. So as I switch back over to this P200, I'm fully zoomed out and I will slowly zoom back in. And in a manual mode, we would start losing exposure. You could see at that moment, we actually applied some gain, the camera did, and we can go in and as zoomed in as before, and we are a lot more exposed than we were when we were just in manual mode. Thanks for tuning in and watching this video. For more information on our cameras, converters, and software, please visit our website at birddog.tv. If you have any workflow design questions, please send us an email to hello@birddog.tv. If you need technical support on a product you currently own, please submit a ticket through our website in the support section or send us an email to help@birddog.tv. Thanks again.